The air reeks of salt and blood. The streets are quiet now, but not because the chaos has ended. It is because there is no one left who dares make a sound. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint clatter of bones against steel, like someone rummaging through a butcher shop made of bodies. You hide behind an overturned bus, its windows shattered, its interior smeared with dried handprints and the unmistakable streaks of claw marks made by human fingernails. You are not running from war, disease, or natural disaster. You are running from dinner, not because you are being chased, but because you are what's on the menu. Your neighbor disappeared last night, your friend the day before. You saw the leftovers. In this world, there are no cows, no grains, no chickens, no fish, not anymore. Every food source vanished overnight, and what remains, the only thing that does not poison the body, is human flesh. Not lab-grown, not artificial, but real, warm, breathing humans. And now, it is your turn to choose. Will you starve to death with your dignity intact, or will you make the cut? To understand how the world arrived at this unimaginable horror, we must go back before the first bite, before the first scream, to the exact day everything changed. A world where only humans are edible. It began on a bright morning in 2031, during what was supposed to be an ordinary global food summit in Geneva. As scientists and policymakers debated climate solutions, a seismic shift was happening, quiet, invisible, but absolute. Within hours, across every continent, plant life began to rot. Wheat turned black in the fields. Fruits exploded into rancid foam. Livestock collapsed, vomiting blood. The oceans boiled with toxins that wiped out entire ecosystems. But here's the nightmare. It was not just environmental collapse, it was precision. Anything not human became instantly inedible. Bacteria infested every food source except one, human tissue. It was as if some twisted biological law rewrote itself across the planet, as if some ancient mechanism had been activated, rendering every conventional nutrient source deadly to the human body. Attempts to consume non-human matter led to rapid organ failure. Even synthetic meals became lethal. The only thing a person could digest safely without suffering excruciating death was another person. Governments declared emergency martial law within 48 hours. Supermarkets emptied in minutes. Riots turned into massacres. At first, people thought this was a temporary glitch in biology, a mutation in gut flora, a sabotage of the food supply. But as days turned into weeks, and research failed to offer any solution, a new reality emerged. One so horrifying, it defied imagination. Society had not simply lost food, it had lost the boundary between civilization and survival. Every human now faced an existential equation. Do you kill to eat, or do you wait to be eaten? In this time travel journey, we will walk through 10 pivotal chapters of this cannibalistic collapse, from the day the food chain vanished to the very last breath of humanity. You will witness it through the eyes of survivors, victims, leaders, and rebels. But be warned, this is not fiction. This is a possible future, one you may not survive. It all began with a silence, when every farm, every barn, every shelf in the world stopped giving, and the food chain crumbled beneath our feet. The vanishing harvest. It started quietly, no sirens, no alarms, just a subtle wrongness that most people failed to notice until it was far too late. On the morning of August 17th, 2031, farmers in Iowa noticed something strange. Fields of corn, perfectly healthy the day before, now stood limp and decaying, their stalks slouching like they had given up on growing. In India, rice paddies frothed with bubbles and a rancid odor that made workers gag before they even stepped into the water. In Brazil, banana plantations turned into fields of gelatinous mush overnight. Cattle across Europe collapsed one by one, their tongues swollen, eyes bleeding, with no clear cause of death. By noon, images of rotting fruits and dead livestock filled social media feeds around the world, each with the same ominous hashtags: hashtag food death, hashtag crop crash, hashtag something is wrong. By the time world leaders issued their first statements, it was already irreversible. Every major crop species, corn, wheat, rice, soybeans, had either dissolved into putrid slime or turned into toxin-laced pulp. Chickens went limp, feathers falling out in clumps. Pigs bloated and ruptured. Fish floated belly up in every major body of water. Honeybees fell from the sky in swarms, unable to process nectar. Every packaged food item, regardless of preservatives, became a biohazard. Entire supermarket aisles reeked of sulfur and decay. Even dry goods like flour and rice, canned tuna, and vacuum-sealed steaks turned black inside their containers, liquefying into foul-smelling sludge. Supply chains did not even have a chance to respond because there was no food to ship. Governments scrambled to investigate. The first theory pointed to a coordinated bioterrorist attack, but no pathogen could be traced. Nothing had been sprayed or released. The Earth itself had changed. The biosphere was now rejecting everything except human tissue as consumable fuel. Scientists desperately tested lab-grown meat, algae-based synthetic food, and processed proteins. None survived digestion. Every simulation led to the same result. The human gut could now only metabolize one thing without violent rejection: human flesh. The panic that followed was not immediate. For a few days, people clung to hope. They raided stores for energy bars, dry cereal, multivitamins, and frozen dinners, but even those began to fail. The preservatives broke down, the molecular structures warped. When people consumed these things, their tongues blistered and their stomachs twisted with burning pain. Emergency rooms filled with cases of internal bleeding. A new term was coined in the news cycle: non-human toxicity syndrome. The phrase was sterile, clinical, but it meant one thing: anything that was not human would kill you if eaten. Then came the fires. Giant agricultural warehouses and meat storage facilities were torched by mobs desperate to cleanse their communities of poison. Food riots exploded in major cities. Police were overwhelmed. Martial law was declared in over 40 countries, but order could not be restored because the need was biological. This was not about politics, it was about eating. And every second, the hunger grew worse. In Tokyo, a child collapsed after licking the wrapper of a candy bar. In Cape Town, a group of neighbors beat a delivery man to death when his food crate arrived empty. In Los Angeles, hospitals became death zones, not because of disease, but because the last edible bodies lay in the morgue. No one said the word out loud at first. It was too unthinkable, but it spread in whispers, like mold in the dark. If no food was left, and only humans could be digested, then what option remained? As the final crumbs of civilization were scraped away, and hunger became the world's new language, the cities began to change. Not through governance or law, but through desperation, because starvation rewrites every rule we once lived by. The first days without food, the silence of an empty stomach is unlike any other. It begins as a distant ache, a dull hollowness beneath the ribs. At first, it is manageable. You drink water, you chew gum, you distract yourself. But then, somewhere around day 2, the silence grows teeth. It whispers things to you about what is edible, about what used to be off limits, about what meat smells like when it is cooking. The hunger is no longer a physical problem. It becomes spiritual, psychological. It becomes a predator nesting inside your body, waiting for you to make a mistake. Cities, designed for convenience and rapid consumption, turned into death traps within days. In New York, skyscrapers stood as hollow monuments to an economy that had no fuel. Elevators stopped working as power grids failed from neglect. Trash overflowed into the streets, but none of it contained anything edible. People roamed through alleyways like feral creatures, searching dumpsters already picked clean. In apartment buildings, neighbors locked their doors not out of fear of theft, but because every locked door was a sealed pantry now. If you were alive, you were food. The government's attempted emergency response. In London, massive airlifts of canned food were dropped onto parks and stadiums, but those rations spoiled instantly upon landing. Even food that had been manufactured minutes earlier turned toxic before it reached human mouths. Food banks became morgues. Volunteers who had distributed food now lay collapsed in the streets, their mouths foaming from the moment they tried to taste a fruit bar or soup packet. In São Paulo, drones dropped nutrient tablets developed in underground labs, but even those backfired, causing convulsions and cardiac arrests. The problem was no longer about feeding the people. It was that nothing outside the human body was food anymore. People began to turn inward, literally. In a horrifying twist of logic, some began to slice pieces of their own flesh, hoping it would sustain them just long enough to think of another plan. An underground video circulated, showing a man calmly slicing strips of thigh muscle and cooking it over a radiator. He smiled as he chewed, his eyes sunken, his lips trembling. That clip was titled Self-Harvest, Day 1. It was uploaded anonymously and viewed over 80 million times in less than 48 hours before being removed. But it was too late. It started a new wave of behavior. In hospitals, patients were abandoned. Medical staff either fled or locked themselves inside supply rooms with scalpels and rationed their own limbs to survive. Makeshift cannibal kitchens popped up in abandoned subway stations. You could smell them before you saw them. A mix of smoke, grease, burning flesh, and something else, something foul and unmistakably human. Police tried to intervene, but many officers had already joined the feasting. Desperation had stripped away their badge, their code, their identity. They were hungry, just like everyone else. You walk through the streets now, past the hollowed eyes of people who were once co-workers, neighbors, even friends. You see signs written in blood on the walls of buildings. Meat inside. Trade flesh for water. Volunteers welcome. You hear children crying not because they are lost, but because their parents are deciding what comes next. And you realize something. No one talks about saving the world anymore. There are no speeches, no rescue operations, no heroes. Everyone is simply trying to survive the day without becoming someone else's dinner. Some try to escape. Highways become battlefields. Thousands attempt to flee cities in caravans, but they are blocked by barricades, ambushed by scavengers, or die in their vehicles from dehydration and psychosis. Forests offer no refuge. The soil rejects seeds. The animals are all gone. Even insects, once the fail-safe food source of survivalists, are toxic now. Nature itself has turned its back on humanity. The only source of nourishment is walking around you, thinking, pleading, hoping. You pass by a church where a service is taking place. Not a sermon, a ritual. The priest blesses a slab of flesh resting on the altar. He does not explain. He simply weeps, then eats. The congregation follows. Cannibalism is no longer taboo. It is sanctified, a means of grace, a form of communion. Their hunger has created a new faith, built not on salvation, but survival. In Paris, cafes once known for fine dining reopen with butcher blocks instead of menus. In Berlin, subway trains are repurposed into transport cages for meat-class citizens. In Manila, the slums erupt in flames as residents fight over the body of a man who collapsed while running. In Chicago, a billionaire offers his own body in exchange for immunity for his family. A grotesque ceremony is held as he is publicly sliced, cooked, and distributed like a prize pig. Cameras roll, people cheer. You begin to realize how thin the veil of civilization truly was. All it took was a shift in biology to reveal the primal monster hiding beneath the surface of every society. The hunger did not just erase the food supply, it erased humanity's mask. By the end of the second week, the city population has halved, not through migration, through digestion. The roads are no longer safe. Public spaces have turned into hunting grounds. And your neighbors, they are either armed or already eaten. And still, the hunger grows. But hunger is not just about need, it is about action. And once the body accepts the unthinkable, the next step is even darker, turning killing into cooking and death into dinner. When morality starves, it always begins with a choice, a moment that divides who you were from what you are about to become. For some, it happened in silence, alone in a room, staring at the still warm body of someone they loved. For others, it happened in the middle of a riot, under streetlights, flickering against pools of blood. But wherever it occurred, the decision was the same: to cross the threshold, to cut into another human being, not for revenge, not for pleasure, but for sustenance. It was in Detroit where the first broadcasted case was captured in full. A security camera caught a man dragging a body behind a grocery store. He pulled out a dull pocket knife, shaking violently, and began to carve. It took him nearly an hour to remove a single strip of flesh from the thigh, but once he tasted it, his expression changed, not to joy or satisfaction, but to quiet acceptance. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a man who had finally given in. The footage went viral, not because it was rare, but because it was happening everywhere. Within days, meat markets reappeared in the shadows of cities. They no longer displayed price tags or health codes. They were back alley stations, makeshift tables lined with plastic sheeting and surgical gloves. Transactions were quick and silent. Sometimes the meat was identified: young male, clean blood, dancers, thighs. Other times it was anonymous. You paid in barter, usually in tools, batteries, or weapons. Money had no value. Flesh was the new currency. The first civilian victims were not criminals or the elderly. They were the lost, the alone, the ones no one would miss. Homeless communities disappeared almost overnight. Then came the wanderers, those trying to flee cities. When their vehicles broke down or their paths led them into the wrong zone, they became inventory. In places like Mexico City and Lagos, entire neighborhoods transformed into trap zones, baited with fake water stations or radio signals, only to capture, kill, and butcher travelers for redistribution. Public morality eroded like dried skin. Parents began having difficult conversations with their children, not about sex or drugs, but about body weight and sacrifice. In some homes, families held lotteries, names in a hat. Whoever was drawn would be the source for the rest. They called it the last gift. Some did it willingly, others fought. Some screamed and were silenced in their own kitchens. An 8-year-old girl in a small village in Eastern Europe famously escaped such a fate by lighting her house on fire with her family inside. She walked barefoot 4 miles before she was taken in by rebels who refused to eat. They called her the Ash Child, and her story became a symbol of lost innocence in a world that had none left. Law enforcement splintered under the strain. Some police departments dissolved altogether, their stations abandoned or overtaken by militia groups. Other departments evolved into harvest divisions. Their job was no longer protecting the public, but overseeing fair and efficient harvesting. They monitored quotas, approved targets, and ensured sanitation procedures were followed. Their badges were still worn, but their weapons were now bone saws and meat hooks. The medical profession, too, shifted its purpose. Hospitals became farms. Doctors and surgeons used their expertise not to heal, but to preserve meat. Amputations were performed as a means of resource management. People volunteered limbs in exchange for protection or access to treatment for their families. The term living donor took on a horrifying new meaning. There were now meat wards in hospitals, rows of semi-sedated individuals being kept alive as long as possible, while parts of them were removed gradually. You visit one of these hospitals during your time travel expedition. The hallway lights flicker. A nurse in blood-stained scrubs guides you past what used to be ICU beds. Now they are filled with groaning figures, missing legs, bandaged stumps, oxygen masks fogged by quiet whimpers. You see a chart above one patient's bed. It lists their blood type, age, muscle mass, and what has already been removed. Left arm, upper torso, slice, half liver. A note reads, "Family has 3 days of food remaining." Another nurse wheels in a portable burner and begins cooking something in a pan. The smell fills the corridor. It smells like seared pork, but richer. The patients close their eyes. Some sob, some salivate. Religious institutions fractured. Some denounced the crisis as the work of the devil. Others reinterpreted scripture to justify the new order. In some temples, sermons began with ceremonial slicing. In others, preachers offered their own bodies in acts of divine sacrifice. A megachurch in Texas broadcast a global service in which its leader crucified himself, offering his body as a holy roast. The congregation fed on him as a choir sang hymns. The footage was archived in the Global Survival Database as File 1477, Worship Through Flesh. And then came the black markets, not the ones that traded anonymous meat, but those that targeted specific individuals. Bounty contracts emerged. Someone would pay you not just for flesh, but for a name. If you could deliver a body, or even just parts, from someone famous, wealthy, or desired, the price was beyond imagination. People were hunted not for who they were, but for the perceived quality of their meat. There were whispers of syndicates capturing musicians, actors, even politicians, selling their organs like luxury items. And what about you? You try not to think about the choice you made on day 6, when the hunger felt like acid in your spine, when your friend collapsed and you sat beside his body for hours, staring, crying, shaking. You did not kill him, but you did not bury him either. The memory plays on repeat, the slicing, the cooking, the sound it made when your teeth sank in. Everyone has a first cut, a moment they cross the boundary. Some cry, some vomit, some do it without blinking, but everyone remembers it. As the line between necessity and evil dissolves, new laws rise to give structure to the savagery. And when governments begin to legalize the unthinkable, the horror becomes permanent. The Human Butchery Act. It began with denial. In the early days, when world leaders were still broadcasting from their bunkers, the tone was cautious. They spoke of temporary crises, research breakthroughs, and upcoming solutions. Their eyes darted nervously, their mouths delivering carefully crafted lies to a public that could already smell the rot behind their screens. But hunger cares little for policy, and when people began eating each other live on national television, when parliamentarians themselves were found butchered inside government kitchens, denial was no longer an option. The first government to legalize cannibalism was Kazakhstan. Its infrastructure had collapsed so quickly that their interim leaders, backed by military control, issued a 2-sentence directive. Human meat is the only sanctioned consumable. Harvesting is permitted under Emergency Survival Code. That message spread faster than any virus in human history. Within 24 hours, dozens of other nations followed, not because they agreed with it, but because they had no other choice. Their hospitals were overwhelmed, their supply chains were gone, their streets were red. The legalization of cannibalism was not a decision, it was a surrender. What came next was paperwork, endless, mind-numbing paperwork attempting to bring structure to chaos. In Canada, the government issued the Human Consumption Protocol, 600 pages of regulations detailing how human bodies could be processed, labeled, and distributed. Each citizen was now required to register with the National Flesh Registry, indicating their physical stats, health condition, and volunteer status. A new department was created, the Ministry of Sustainable Bodies. Their slogan, horrifyingly casual, was "Meat must continue." Across the Atlantic, France implemented a caste system. Citizens were divided into 4 classes: sustainers, who volunteered their bodies; harvesters, trained in processing and preparation; eaters, those unable to contribute flesh but deemed essential to survival, such as scientists and doctors; and finally, reserves, the unwanted, the disabled, the elderly, and the incarcerated. Reserves were considered national property. They were tagged, tracked, and rotated through public kitchens like cattle. In the United States, the transition was brutal. After initial civil wars in several states over ethical refusal zones, the federal government collapsed and a new entity emerged, the Unified Continental Authority. This group, a coalition of surviving military and corporate powers, passed the Butchery Stabilization Act, legalizing not only the consumption of human meat, but the mandatory donation of flesh upon death. Corpses were to be collected within 4 hours of expiration, and non-compliance meant execution and forfeiture. Funeral homes became collection points. Cemeteries were torn down. Cremation was banned. The dead were too valuable to waste. You travel now through the ruins of Washington, D.C., where the one sacred national mall is a distribution hub. Cargo drones move human remains with surgical precision, dropping off legs, torsos, even whole heads into refrigerated units. Civilian volunteers stand in line to receive ration kits packed by calorie weight. Each meal includes a tag, the donor's name, location, and genetic profile. Some recipients read them, others do not. It no longer matters who the meat was. It only matters that it fills the void in your gut. Religious leaders, what few remained, fractured completely. The Vatican issued a desperate plea, calling the new laws an abomination of the soul. But within months, even the Holy See was surrounded by starving pilgrims, eating the bodies of guards and clergy. The Pope himself vanished, last seen boarding a helicopter over Sicily. Whether he escaped or was eaten remains a mystery. In Mecca, pilgrims wept as they consumed one another within the sacred walls, their prayers merging with cries of guilt and gratitude. Faith, for many, was no longer about salvation. It was about survival through sacrifice, and sacrifice became institutionalized. The concept of flesh tithing took root. Every citizen was required to donate a portion of their body once per year. Surgical caravans traveled from town to town, harvesting limbs in exchange for food credits. Children were exempt until they turned 12. Then, like a twisted birthday, right? They were introduced to the donation table. Some were brave, others screamed until their voices gave out, but all were processed. The tithes were non-negotiable. To maintain order, new media emerged. Cooking shows now featured government chefs instructing viewers on safe butchering techniques. National contests offered prizes for the most elegant human recipes. In China, a culinary competition show called Fleshmaster drew in over 200 million weekly viewers, with contestants presenting dishes like Szechuan shoulder roast and 5-spice foot stew. Critics praised the artistry. Sponsors profited enormously. Even children watched, learning early that culinary creativity could mean the difference between being a chef and being an ingredient. And in the shadows, a new economy blossomed. Private auctions emerged for premium bodies, athletes, celebrities, intellectuals. Wealthy elites would bid billions for a steak carved from a physicist's brain or a slice of a viral influencer's glutes. In some places, entire families were bred in secret facilities for generational harvesting. Cloning was outlawed, ironically, to maintain natural purity. You walk through one of these auction houses. Behind glass cases, sedated bodies lie in suspended animation, labeled and priced like luxury vehicles. The air smells of antiseptic, money, and faintly of blood. Some still resisted. Underground networks spread digital pamphlets titled "Meat is Murder, even if it's all we have." They staged public immolations, starving themselves as protest. Others formed breakaway colonies, attempting to live off the land, eating bark, soil, even their own excrement to avoid consuming flesh. None of them lasted. The environment no longer permitted alternate life. Every plant burned the stomach. Every animal died on contact. These resistance movements left only bones, their message etched into stone, smeared in ash and bile. Better to die empty than to live full. Back in the cities, the average citizen no longer thought about ethics. They thought about hunger, about rations, about the next cut. The first time you taste human meat, sanctioned by the state, it is prepared for you in a community kitchen. You are handed a tray. On it, a portion of steamed mussel and a gelatinous protein puree made from spinal marrow. You ask the cook if he knows who it was. He shrugs. Probably someone from Sector 12. Good people there. Real clean eaters. You sit at a plastic table, surrounded by dozens of others, all eating in silence. No one talks, no one cries. The only sound is chewing. You chew, too. And once laws normalize the unspeakable, the next step is industrialization. Because in a world where only human meat can sustain life, the body becomes a resource to be bred, managed, and harvested. You are livestock now. You hear it before you see it. The humming of high-voltage fences, the rhythmic clanking of metal gates, and the haunting moans of 1,000 souls reduced to their calorie count. This is no prison, no hospital, no refugee center. This is a human farm, a fully automated, government-sanctioned facility designed to breed, harvest, and distribute living human meat. You were brought here after your third failed attempt to escape the city. The authorities did not execute you. That would be wasteful. Instead, they reclassified you. Tier 2 resource. Now your body belongs to the nutritional ministry. The entrance to the facility is sterilized and brightly lit, but the stench of sweat, blood, and boiled flesh still seeps through the air vents. The walls are lined with touchscreen menus that list the current harvest yield for various body parts: thighs, livers, ribs, shoulders, reproductive organs, tongues. Everything has a value, a measurement, a market. New arrivals are tagged with wristbands linked to national health databases, tracking their fat ratio, muscle mass, disease history, and most importantly, compliance rating. You are marched through a corridor alongside dozens of others, all in identical gray bodysuits. Some walk calmly, their eyes glazed with sedatives or resignation. Others whisper prayers under their breath or sob quietly. A few are children, no older than 12, already fitted with biometric collars. Above each hallway, digital banners scroll the government slogan, "Every body feeds the future." The first room is called Selection. Here, a panel of AI monitors and a lone technician evaluate your worth. Your measurements are taken, your skin is scanned, your teeth inspected. They do not speak to you. They simply upload your data into the system and let the algorithm determine your fate. You are then sorted into one of 3 color-coded tracks: blue for short-term yield, yellow for long-term breeders, and red for high-grade organ extraction. You are tagged red. The next few days pass in a haze of routine and preparation. You are housed in a temperature-controlled chamber with 49 others. Every cell is monitored by motion sensors, biometric trackers, and infrared scans. There are no beds, just reclining units designed to maximize muscle relaxation and meat tenderness. You are given fluid packs infused with vitamins and sedatives. You are told not to speak unless addressed. You are told not to resist when the handlers arrive. Those who do are reassigned to accelerated harvest zones, where death comes within hours and the meat is rushed to critical supply regions. Handlers wear surgical robes and do not make eye contact. When they enter the room, all movement stops. They walk between the recliners, scanning each occupant, checking for growth metrics. When a name is called, that person stands and follows without protest. The others remain silent, knowing that to be chosen is inevitable. No one speaks of escape anymore. There is no outside to return to. Every village, every city, every stretch of farmland has been converted or consumed. The world is no longer made of nations and cultures. It is a grid of processing centers and delivery networks. You are not a citizen. You are a product. There is a nursery wing here too. It is one of the few places where joy still exists, though it is warped and twisted beyond recognition. Newborns are evaluated at birth for their genetic desirability. Those with high-yield traits, strong bones, fast growth, resistance to disease, are raised in specialized cradles, rotated every few hours for even muscle distribution. They are not named, they are numbered. Batch 47 Alpha is the top-performing line this quarter. Visitors come from across the continent to inspect them through bulletproof glass, admiring the plump arms and symmetrical organs like a connoisseur might admire fine wine. Some adults volunteer for the farms. They arrive with resignation or fanatical pride. They believe in the flesh economy, a belief system that sees human meat as the next stage in planetary evolution. They give speeches before donation, smiling, weeping, holding hands with loved ones who cheer them on as they walk to the preparation chambers. These noble feeders are celebrated with murals, currency faces, even statues in government plazas. Their meat is considered sacred, expensive, served at state dinners and elite banquets. You once overheard a handler talking to a rookie recruit. "This is not murder," he said. "This is stewardship. You are managing inventory, not killing people. The body is a resource, not a person. They are fed, clothed, cleaned. They live longer here than they would outside." The recruit nodded slowly. You saw his hands shake. Each day is tightly controlled. At 6 a.m., recliner pods open for body washing and blood circulation exercises. At 7 a.m., temperature-regulated nutrient packs are issued. At 9 a.m., skin exfoliation and muscle assessments. The afternoon is spent in silence. At 1800, a gentle chime signals pre-harvest rest. Some farms allow music, soft classical compositions, or government-approved ambient tones to soothe the nerves. Others opt for silence. Every moment is calculated to minimize panic and maximize meat quality. Stress tightens the flesh. Calm makes it tender. And yet, even within this nightmare, resistance simmers. A rumor spreads that one of the breeding units faked an illness and sabotaged her own evaluation report. Another supposedly swapped biometric tags with a corpse, escaping during a delivery run. In the dead of night, you hear whispers through the ventilation system, codes, chants, instructions. The message is always the same. We are still human, but even those voices fade eventually, smothered by the hum of refrigeration units and the quiet hiss of steam cleaners sterilizing blood off stainless steel. You are summoned on the 7th day. A red light blinks above your recliner. You rise, you walk. The hallways feel longer, now colder. You pass through a decontamination chamber, then into a room that looks more like a kitchen than a surgical suite. Stainless steel counters, vacuum sealers, digital carving templates. A woman in a white apron greets you with a professional nod. She does not ask your name. She simply says, "Thank you for your contribution," and gestures for you to lie down. You lie still, eyes fixed on the ceiling. A soft tune plays through hidden speakers. You recognize it, a lullaby your mother once sang to you. The irony tastes bitter on your tongue as the sedative flows into your veins and your limbs begin to numb. You wonder if someone, somewhere, will feel guilt when they eat you, or will you be just another number in the ration log? But even within this machinery of obedience and control, not all choose submission. Some refuse the taste of flesh entirely, waging a final, doomed rebellion against a world that no longer tolerates mercy. The last vegetarians. They call them fools, idealists, martyrs. They are the ones who refused, the ones who would rather starve than take a single bite of human flesh. In a world where consumption equals survival, they are seen as suicidally noble, a throwback to a time when ethics could still outweigh instinct, but to the resistance, they are not weak. They are the last line in the sand between civilization and extinction. They are the last vegetarians. You meet them in the ruins of an abandoned library outside Prague, far from the ration routes and surveillance zones. The building is crumbling, its roof partially collapsed, the staircases blackened from an old fire. And yet, the air here is calm, free of that metallic smell of processed human meat. Books, long useless for knowledge, are now insulation for the cold stone walls. In the back room, under a lantern's glow, a group of 12 sits in silence. Some are gaunt and sickly, others alert and sharpened. None of them have eaten human flesh, not once, not even during the worst winters. They rely on a diet of dirt-extracted mineral packs, synthetic fiber gels smuggled in from expired tech labs, and their own dwindling fat reserves. It is not enough. Many of them are dying, but they are free, at least in their minds. Their leader is a woman named Miko, a former biologist who once worked for the United Nations Agriculture Restoration Council. She explains the Resistance's mission with a mixture of hope and despair. The world accepted too quickly, she says. We gave up to isolate. We didn't fight for alternatives. We surrendered to cannibalism before the science had even finished evolving. Her theory, radical but not impossible, is that the digestive shift was not permanent, that it was a biodaptive mutation, not a final transformation. She believes it could be reversed, if only someone had kept trying. But no major institution did. Not the corporations, not the governments, not even the labs. Within months of the crisis, most scientific facilities were either co-opted into meat distribution or dismantled entirely. Research became taboo. Funding dried up. The world did not want a solution. It wanted submission. Only rogue elements, like Miko's network, still believed in alternatives. The resistance operates in cells, small, isolated, nearly invisible. They move through subway tunnels, forgotten bunkers, mountain caves, and storm drains. They communicate using encrypted, handwritten messages passed by surviving pigeons or carried in waterproof capsules sewn into scavenged clothing. Their weapons are primitive, old rifles, blades, chemical traps. Their missions are surgical: sabotage food convoys, assassinate harvest commanders, intercept newborns destined for the farms, and broadcast forbidden knowledge about the origins of the shift. One night, you follow them on a raid. The target is a ration depot in what used to be Vienna. The goal is not to steal the meat, but to destroy it, to send a message. As the group moves through dark alleys, avoiding patrol drones, the tension in the air is thick. Every breath you take feels like it might be your last. When you arrive, the depot is guarded by 2 sentries. Miko signals the younger members to flank while she draws attention. A flash grenade goes off. Shots ring out. In under a minute, the guards are down and the entrance is breached. Inside, rows of refrigerated crates line the walls, humming with cold precision. Each crate is labeled with barcodes, harvest dates, and donor codes. The smell, even through the metal, is overwhelming. The group works quickly, pouring accelerant and planting thermite charges. Before they leave, they take one body, intact, unprocessed, a child no older than 10. Her barcode reads, Class B, Batch 12, Heart, Liver Grade, A. Miko lifts the child's body gently, her voice trembling. This is not food, she says, almost to herself. This is someone's daughter. As the facility erupts in flames behind you, the sky lights up with automated alarms. Surveillance satellites ping locations. Resistance members scatter. 2 are caught and executed publicly the next day, their heads displayed on ration billboards as warnings. But the mission was a success. Thousands of meals were lost. Panic spreads through nearby processing centers. Rumors begin that the resistance is growing bolder, more coordinated, more widespread. Yet hope is thin. For every depot they destroy, 5 more are fortified. For every child they save, dozens vanish. The resistance is not winning. They are delaying extinction. Most people view them with contempt. Some see them as dangerous dreamers, others as traitors hoarding food. Government propaganda depicts them as flesh deniers, fanatics who would rather let humanity starve than embrace the future of nutrition. But cracks are forming. Small communities begin to whisper about the raids, not with anger, but with curiosity. What if there is another way? What if the digestive change is not permanent? Some defectors from the processing industry contact Miko, offering stolen research, smuggled test results, old-world enzyme studies. One document claims that in a sealed biolab in Patagonia, a test subject survived 6 weeks on a modified cellulose compound. The lab was shut down before it could continue. Another file includes a banned report suggesting the original mutation may have come not from nature, but from engineered microbes released into the ecosystem. No one knows by whom or why. Even within the farms, rebellion stirs. A nurse in a Tier 1 facility quietly administers sedatives to her patients to spare them the pain of harvest. A cook secretly burns portions of meat rather than serve them. A handler records a video confession, admitting the quotas are not necessary, that they are harvesting far more than needed, that this has become a business, not a necessity. The resistance collects these fragments and compiles them into the Red Ledger, a growing digital archive of testimonies, scientific leads, and survivor journals. It spreads through black market tablets and hacked radio signals. Every new entry inspires another to resist, another to question, another to hope. But resistance has a cost. The government declares war on non-consumers. Anyone found refusing to eat human meat is branded an obstructionist and sentenced to flesh stripping, public removal of organs until compliance or death. Whole communities are raised under suspicion of harboring vegetarians. In Mongolia, a mountain monastery of 200 monks is bombed after rumors surface that they had gone a year without eating meat. Only one survives, a young man with burns across half his body, who crawls 40 miles to deliver a scroll, a written list of meditation techniques used to suppress hunger beyond the limits of physiology. You read the scroll as a guest of the resistance. The words are shaken, faded, but their meaning is clear. The mind can overcome the body. If the body is the battlefield, then hunger is the weapon, and every day you do not eat is a day you win. Still, the resistance is running out of time. Resources dwindle, betrayals increase. Surveillance tech becomes nearly impossible to evade. Drones with infrared sniffers now patrol the woods, scanning for undigested plant residue in human waste. A single mistake reveals your entire location. In one raid gone wrong, Miko is captured. Her last message is scrawled on a wall in her blood. Do not digest the dead, digest the truth. The rebellion continues. But it is no longer just about stopping cannibalism. It is about remembering what it meant to be human in a world that forgot. But resisting the meat is only one battle. A darker war brews beneath the surface because the act of consumption has begun to alter more than just biology. It is changing the mind, the soul, and what it even means to feel human. The taste of madness. The first time you eat human flesh, something shifts, not just in your stomach, but in your mind. You try to push the memory away, the sound of your chewing, the warmth of it on your tongue, the knowledge of whose body it came from. But that awareness does not go away. It roots itself in the folds of your brain like mold, quietly altering how you see the world. You tell yourself it was just survival. You try to be grateful. You say a name. You thank them. But eventually, that ritual fades too. And when you take your second bite, the third, the 10th, you stop thinking altogether. You only taste. And that taste becomes addictive. Across the world, the hunger is no longer about necessity. It becomes a craving, an obsession. People begin to seek out specific textures, flavors, even personalities, believing that something of the soul lingers in the meat. A woman in Berlin refuses to eat anything but the hearts of artists, convinced their creativity will transfer to her. A cult in Indonesia believes enlightenment can only be achieved by consuming the eyes of priests. In South Africa, an elite restaurant called Veritas offers tongue tastings, samples of 10 different dialect speakers, each paired with a wine that complements their regional heritage. The psychological collapse is not just individual, it becomes cultural. Children raised in the meat economy know no other way. They play games where they pretend to carve each other with imaginary knives, giggling as they assign flavor profiles. A popular toy line called Lil Butchers includes plastic cleavers, dolls with removable limbs, and cookbooks for kid-safe harvests. In one school, you watch a child draw a family tree, not with names and birthdays, but with recipes. Uncle Ben as brisket, Aunt Maria as liver stew. The teachers do not correct them. They hang the pictures with pride. Dreams begin to change. People across different countries report visions of endless banquet halls, blood-red rivers, cities made of bone. Psychologists, what few remain, classify a new condition called Eucharist syndrome, a mental affliction where the boundary between self and meal blurs. Victims often cook parts of their own bodies, believing they are giving offerings to their future selves. One case report details a man who slow-cooked his own hand, served it to guests, and said, "This way, I will always be part of you." He was applauded for his hospitality. Religions adapt in horrifying ways. In the new gospel of flesh, communion is no longer symbolic. Congregants share real blood and real meat, often from their most devout members. Churches keep donation walls where believers pledge parts of themselves in sacred contracts. One rising movement teaches that the soul only finds release when the body has been consumed by love, that is, by another's hunger. A preacher in Argentina goes viral after declaring, "We are not devouring each other. We are reuniting with each other. We are one body, one flesh." But not all breakdowns are spiritual. Some are purely animal. In the slums of what used to be Cairo, the screams never stop. Not because people are starving, but because they are feeding, constantly, endlessly, frantically. The market square is a nightmare of dismemberment and frenzy. People eat with bare hands, from buckets, from severed torsos, carried like picnic baskets. No one questions the origin anymore. They do not care if it is fresh, or clean, or even human. They just eat. You pass through wearing a gas mask, trying not to vomit. You see a man tearing flesh from his own thigh, laughing and crying at the same time. His eyes are gone, his mouth smeared with red. He offers you a piece like he is sharing candy, and it does not stop with behavior. It rewrites biology. Studies show that repeated consumption of human flesh triggers neurological degeneration in some, but in others, it heightens aggression, lowers empathy, and amplifies primal instincts. Cities begin to devolve. Murder becomes entertainment. Organized meat rings pit families against each other in survival arenas, where the winners live and the losers feed the crowd. In Shanghai, a 6-month-old baby is auctioned alive to the highest bidder during a televised gala. The audience cheers. The parents bow. This is no longer a tragedy. It is tradition. Language begins to change. The word person becomes outdated. People refer to one another by cut, not by name. Good shoulders on that one. Thick ribs must be a farmer. Even sexual slang is replaced with butchery terms. Intimacy is no longer about connection. It is about appetite. In the high towers of the rich, elite meat tastings become erotic affairs, blending the lines between consumption and arousal. In lower districts, people sell parts of their body, like sex work, tongue sessions, blood licks, ear bites. What used to be taboo has now become status. And all the while, hallucinations grow. People start seeing the ones they ate, faces in puddles, whispers in empty rooms, phantom limbs. Guilt, where it exists, turns into madness. One woman in Ukraine confesses to seeing the faces of her children in every piece of meat she consumes. She still eats. She simply cries while doing it. Her neighbors commend her for her honesty. The world becomes divided into two types: those who devour without thought, and those who devour while haunted. Either way, the line is crossed. No one is whole anymore. Everyone is fractured, gnawed down by hunger and horror. Trust evaporates. No one dares sleep without a lock. No one embraces without checking for knives. Marriage becomes a binding agreement of non-consumption. Love becomes a pact to not eat each other if things get bad. And you wake up in a bunker, unable to remember what part of your body you gave away last week. Your left leg aches. The scar says it was recently removed and reattached, but you do not remember offering it. You find a note taped to your chest. You said it was okay. You were hungry. You asked us to hold onto this piece of you until you returned. The signature is your own handwriting. You have no memory of writing it. You begin to question whether you are still you. How many parts of you are even yours anymore? Are your hands still your hands? Is your mind still your own? Or have you been eaten in pieces over time until only your thoughts remain? Across the ruins of civilization, voices echo this question. Survivors gather in therapy camps, old warehouses where they scream, cry, and confess what they have become. Some are amputated shadows of themselves. Others are covered in ritual scars and brands. They hold each other, whispering names of people they once loved, people they have consumed. This is not the collapse of a food chain. This is the disintegration of the human identity. Hunger did not just kill society, It reprogrammed it. It rewired the brain, turned kindness into currency, turned survival into savagery, and still they eat. And as madness spreads and flesh becomes the only measure of worth, an old poison returns: inequality. Because in this world of hunger and horror, not all bodies are valued equally. The wealthy feast, the poor are farmed, and the great divide grows sharper than any butcher's blade. Premium cuts and the poor man's bone. The hunger did not erase inequality, it amplified it. In fact, the moment human flesh became the only form of nourishment, the global class system did not vanish, it calcified. The rich adapted, the poor were consumed, and somewhere in the middle, people like you watched as civilization drew a new line between privilege and perishability. You see it first in the ration queues, in the outer districts of former megacities like Jakarta, Lagos, and Detroit. The state distributes weekly meat bags to the public. They are small, cold, and vaguely human in shape. The contents are never labeled. One day you might receive a thigh muscle from a convicted criminal. The next, a sliver of pancreas from a street orphan. Nobody asks questions anymore. You take what is given, or you starve. But up the hill, past the electrified gates, the elite dine in carnivore clubs, with names like the Sovereign Tongue and Red Reserve. There, the menu is transparent, curated, luxurious. Cuts are labeled by age, heritage, education level, and emotional condition at the time of harvest. The more fear the donor felt, the richer the flavor, they say. One evening, you're smuggled into one such establishment for reconnaissance. The room glows with soft gold light. Chandeliers hum gently over velvet booths where the most powerful people on earth sip marrow cocktails. A chef in bloodless white presents a dish he calls philosopher's flank, meat taken from a literature professor who volunteered after a stroke. The diners nod appreciatively, murmuring about tenderness and cognitive richness. Each bite is followed by a toast. To taste is to remember. You watch as dessert is served, candied fingertips still bearing traces of ink under the nails. An executive asks if they came from a pianist. The chef smiles and says, "Close." A surgeon. Outside the compound, a different story unfolds. In the ghettos, people sell off their bodies piece by piece just to gain entry into lower-tier kitchens. A woman in Mumbai auctions her left leg to buy a week of protection for her daughter. A man in the slums of Rio offers his kidneys to bribe a hospital guard into letting him spend the night indoors. Across Africa's interior, old colonial-era roads are renamed harvest corridors, where trucks pass daily, collecting volunteers from the impoverished and shipping them to national butchery centers. They are never seen again. No payment, no recognition, just meat. The disparity extends to language. The upper class now speaks in culinary euphemisms. Delicate means underweight. Robust implies high protein yield. Aged refers to the elderly, whose organs are more fragile but supposedly sweeter. In contrast, the poor speak in wounds. They do not describe themselves as hungry. They say, "I am hollow." They do not beg for food. They say, "Use me." Survival becomes a form of offering. Living becomes a debt. In what used to be the United Kingdom, a new currency is developed. Flesh credits. Each citizen has an assigned value based on genetic profile, productivity, and harvest readiness. These credits can be traded, loaned, inherited. If you fall into debt, the system automatically deducts from your flesh reserve. If you are a parent, Your children's meat is collateral. Banks no longer seize homes, they seize limbs. A boy named Ellis makes headlines after losing both legs at age 8 to pay for his father's medical bill. The hospital gives him a sticker that says, "Thank you for your generosity." Education is no longer free. In Switzerland, elite children attend the Academy of Sustainable Flesh, a school where biology, finance, and culinary studies are merged into a single discipline: ethical harvest management. Their textbooks include graphs on muscle-fat ratios, ethics essays debating the acceptable age for harvesting, and step-by-step guides for skin removal with minimal scarring. Their uniforms are white, crisp, and blood-resistant. Meanwhile, children in lower zones are taught one lesson only: obedience prolongs your expiration date. Fashion changes too. The wealthy wear synthetic leathers and skin-stitched couture that mimics the texture of desirable donors. A popular design in Tokyo incorporates real tattooed skin from artists who were harvested young. Each piece comes with a certificate of authenticity and a photo of the original bearer, smiling, healthy, still whole. It is not considered macabre, it is considered tasteful. Even romance is tiered. Matchmaking platforms now offer genetic meat compatibility, allowing the rich to pair with partners whose eventual meat will pair well with theirs in aging cellars. Couples make pacts to be consumed by each other upon death, a macabre take on devotion. These gourmet love stories are celebrated, documented, immortalized in cookbooks and documentaries. In contrast, among the poor, marriage proposals are replaced with safety contracts, agreements to protect one another from consumption until pregnancy or arrest. You hear stories of cruelty so extreme they feel fictional. A tech mogul purchases an entire village in the Philippines to serve as a personal larder. He names each resident after cuts of meat: brisket, sirloin, tenderloin. He raises them with care, feeds them well, even educates them. But once a year, he harvests one during a televised feast. He calls it his sustainable family supper. Governments turn a blind eye. After all, he funds 3 of the world's largest donor farms. But not all rich are monsters. Some simply hide behind policy. They argue that the poor must contribute because they consume fewer resources. They justify the system with phrases like nutritional redistribution and bioeconomic equity. They smile as they eat because they believe they are keeping the world in balance. They are wrong. The system is failing. Underground reports show signs of protein collapse. Too many poor have been harvested. Yields are dropping. Meat is turning sour. The bodies are thinner, weaker, sickly. The farms try to correct the problem with hormonal injections and nutrient infusions, but it is not enough. Quality flesh is now a luxury. The rich begin cloning themselves again, illegally, in offshore labs. These eco-farms are hidden in subglacial bunkers, where elite DNA is grown, matured, and consumed without the messiness of social guilt. These clones are called voids. They are soulless, they say, born to be eaten. They do not speak. They are programmed not to resist. But whispers spread that the voids are becoming aware, that in one lab, a clone broke its restraints and whispered the name of its original before being incinerated. In another, a technician disappeared, his body never found, only a message written on the wall in blood. I remember everything. The divide cannot hold forever. The poor begin to riot, not because they want to eat better, but because they want to stop being eaten. Cities burn, convoys are raided, Processing centers are bombed. One by one, the walls around elite districts crack. But for now, they still hold. The rich still dine on hope, ignorance, and carefully harvested lies. And you are somewhere in the middle. Not rich enough to dine, not poor enough to be butchered. You are a shadow, slipping between roles, trying to stay unremarkable. Because in this world, the moment someone sees you as desirable, your days are numbered. Yet even this grotesque system of inequality is not the end. Because eventually, culture itself changes. The songs, the stories, the beliefs, everything begins to revolve around flesh. And when civilization worships the meal instead of the meaning, what remains is something unrecognizable. When humanity becomes cuisine, it is no longer just survival. The hunger has shaped more than politics, economy, and morality. It has redefined culture. Everywhere you look, the world celebrates flesh, not as taboo, but as identity. It is in the stories people tell, the art they create, the songs they sing. It is in every flag, every anthem, every monument. Humanity has become cuisine, and civilization now orbits around the ritual of consumption. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower has been wrapped in a permanent red silk shroud, rebranded as the Temple of Taste. Beneath it, daily festivals are held where families gather to prepare and present dishes made from loved ones who passed on. Music plays. Dancers wear aprons made from cured skin, swirling through blood-slick streets with barefoot grace. Tourists come from across the world to witness the art of farewell feasting. These are not moments of mourning, they are celebrations. To be eaten is to be honored. To cook a loved one well is considered the highest form of affection. In Tokyo, the National Museum of Culinary Identity now replaces every classical art piece with meat carvings of famous historical figures. A full-scale bust of Einstein carved from freeze-dried thigh muscle, a reclining Venus modeled from spinal fat. Children on school trips are taught to appreciate marbling, blood flow, and skin tone the way they once studied brushwork or marble texture. Museums even feature preserved dishes made from historic harvests, meat from scholars, leaders, saints. One plaque reads, "Here lies the tongue of the last poet, served during the World Memory Banquet, 2043. New musical genres emerge. The haunting ballads of bonefolk blend acoustic instruments with the sounds of carving, sizzling, and chewing. Lyrics revolve around longing, sacrifice, and taste. A popular single called "Eat Me Gently" tops global charts, its chorus sung from the perspective of someone begging to be remembered by flavor alone. If you love me, cook me slow. Let the spices sing my soul. Concerts now conclude with meat showers, shredded, seasoned cuts flung into the crowd as a final ovation. National holidays shift as well. Former days of independence or harvest festivals are replaced by consumption rights. In the United States, Thanksgiving replaces Thanksgiving, a day where families nominate one willing member to contribute meat for the feast. In South Korea, Bone Year marks the lunar transition with competitive carving contests. In Germany, Reckoning Day is celebrated with symbolic wrist cuts to represent sacrifice, followed by public roastings of volunteer donors in city squares. Every nation has its own rituals, but they share the same truth. Flesh is sacred, and to feed others is the highest calling. Religions that once condemned cannibalism now embrace it. Holy texts are reinterpreted. Entire faiths rewrite their origin stories. In the new global scripture, the book of mouth. God does not create man from clay, but from raw flesh and divine fire. Salvation is not earned through prayer, but through flavor. Pilgrimages are made not to sacred lands, but to kitchens where saints were cooked. In Jerusalem, the Wailing Wall is now a granite carving board stained with the blood of martyrs who offered themselves for divine consumption. Worshippers leave offerings of spices and thank you notes to those who fed the faith. Education is no longer about knowledge, it is about preparation. In classrooms, students dissect synthetic humans made of meat substitutes, learning how to properly cut, cook, and present every part of the body. Children as young as 6 are graded on presentation, texture, control, and seasoning. Graduation ceremonies feature not speeches, but meal contributions. The highest achieving students offer a toe, a slice of cheek, or a portion of calf as a symbolic pledge to serve society. Even language changes. Sayings like break a leg are now literal. Give me a piece of your mind means volunteering brain samples. You are what you eat becomes a badge of loyalty. People wear tattoos of those they've consumed. The world speaks in flavors. Love is described as savory, regret as bitter, betrayal as overcooked. Emotion itself is culinary. The entertainment industry is transformed. Reality shows like MasterCarve pit chefs against each other to prepare human meat under pressure. Judges critique based on creativity, cultural fusion, and ethical harvesting. Theaters no longer screen films. They offer immersive dining experiences where the actors are served in courses during the performance. Audiences are invited to taste the villain after the climax. Immersive horror houses offer panic meat. Tours guests are chased through mazes and then offered cuts from actors whose stress hormones supposedly add a unique flavor profile. In Brazil, a sport called meatball dominates the stadiums. Teams compete to capture opponents and carry them across a goal zone, at which point they are claimed and symbolically sliced. The players wear reinforced armor, but the prize is always real. The team captain must donate a part of himself for the post-game banquet. Fans chant, not for victory, but for flavor. Leg, 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 rib, rib, rib. Winning is tasty, losing is devoured. And it does not end with the living. Even the dead are not safe from desecration. Cemeteries have been replaced by body cellars, temperature-controlled mausoleums, where the deceased are cured like wine or smoked for premium texture. Funerals are held in kitchens. Families weep as chefs unveil the body, cleaned, perfumed, and ready for carving. Eulogies now end with recipes. He was a good man, sweet in life, sweet in glaze. Art no longer speaks of the future. It chews on the present. Graffiti on city walls reads, "We are meals wearing shoes." Sculptors mold wax figures filled with real blood that burst when exposed to heat. Writers pen cookbooks that double as philosophy treatises. The best-selling novel of the decade is The Marrow in My Lover's Bones, a tragic romance between two chefs who promise to eat each other if captured by ration lords. Even science has changed direction. Geneticists now work to design the most flavorful human possible. Traits like muscle density, collagen distribution, fat marbling, and even blood sweetness are now central to designer birth programs. Parents select embryos not for intelligence or strength, but for taste. One popular modification ensures that a child will have a lemon zest aftertaste at age 18. They are called citrus kids. Advertisements show them smiling beside slogans like, "Raise a child who's deliciously yours." The planet, now tamed by hunger, is quieter. No farms, no crops, no birdsong. Just the machinery of harvesting, the rituals of eating, and the soft chanting of those who remember what life used to be like. A museum in Iceland preserves the last apple, now shriveled and blackened behind bulletproof glass. Tourists stare at it like a ghost. A recording plays beside it. Once we fed on trees. Once the earth gave freely. But that age is gone. And you walk among these people, unsure whether you are one of them or just an observer from a better time. You have eaten, you have carved, you have served and been served. You know the smell of roasted leg like it was your own name, but something in you recoils now, not with guilt, but with nausea. You wonder if culture is supposed to elevate humanity or just decorate its fall. Because this is not culture. This is hunger dressed in gold, and still the hunger grows. Even culture cannot sustain a world devouring itself. Eventually, even the richest bodies run out. The recipes fail, the rituals lose meaning, and what remains is silence, starvation, and the final descent into extinction. When there is no one left to eat, the end does not arrive with a bang, but with a slow, soft emptiness. There are no more screams in the cities, no sizzling from kitchen hearths, no music playing in butchered plazas. The hunger, once a global roar, has become a whisper in the dark, raspy, tired, and unfulfilled. Civilization is not destroyed in one instant. It withers, piece by piece, like meat left too long in the sun. The warning signs were always there. In the farms, birth rates had dropped by 70%. Hormone treatments failed. Generations bred for flavor began showing signs of sterility. Organs became less viable. Flesh lost its elasticity. Even the best cuts tasted wrong, stringy, acidic, tainted by generations of nutrient recycling and trauma. The high-yield donors began to wither under their own biology, like over-farmed soil. The supply curve bent downward. Desperation followed. Processing centers that once churned out meals for millions began to shut their doors. Refrigeration units ran dry. Cities dimmed. Drones flew overhead, scanning for movement in alleys, only to find nothing. The rich clung to their personal stockpiles, retreating into mountain vaults, underwater preserves, orbital biospheres. But isolation became a coffin. Clones turned on their creators. Fortresses became tombs. The last billionaire was discovered gnawing on his own hand, surrounded by gold-plated bones and rotting banquet tables. His final diary entry read, "I outlived the menu." In the absence of meat, people tried to return to other foods, anything: grass, plastic, paper, fungus scraped from walls. But the body's intolerance to non-human substances remained. Digestive systems, long rewired by evolution or plague or divine punishment, rejected everything but the forbidden source. Those who tried were met with agony. Organs shut down, skin peeled, brains hemorrhaged from toxicity. The earth, as if revenging itself, no longer welcomed its former children. You walk through a city now, what used to be San Francisco. The fog rolls in off the water, but no horns sound. The bridge is collapsed. The bay is black. Skyscrapers rise like bones from an open grave. You pass a meat distribution center. Its walls are painted with a mural. Humans smiling while feeding each other beneath a blood-red sun. Inside, The freezers are open, empty, rusted. On the floor lies a skeleton in a chef's coat, arms wrapped around a pan. There are no teeth in the skull, just holes. In the countryside, nature begins to reclaim its throne, though not with life. Fields are barren, trees produce no fruit. The soil, once rich and dark, is pale and acidic. Winds carry ash and flakes of human fat from cremation zones where mass burnings were enacted after supply collapse. Wild animals are extinct. Insects are gone. The silence of extinction is almost holy. Yet a few still survive, hiding in bunkers, mountain caves, or deep underground vaults. Not because they are lucky, but because they are cursed to remember. You find one such place in the heart of the Alps, a research station turned tomb. Inside, automated systems are still running. Flickering monitors display charts of population collapse. A countdown blinks on a screen. Estimated global survivors, less than 1,000. You scroll through logs left behind by a scientist named Eli, whose last recorded message is still on the main console. His voice trembles with exhaustion. We thought we could beat biology, adapt, control it, make it work for us. We turned people into food, culture into seasoning, faith into flavor. But we forgot something. You cannot eat yourself forever. Eventually, the meal ends. The screen goes dark. Outside, you meet one of the last groups of survivors. 6 men and women, wrapped in tattered uniforms, still armed with knives and bone saws, though they have not seen fresh meat in months. They are no longer scavengers. They are watchers, witnesses. They no longer hunt. They remember. One of them, a boy no older than 16, leads you to a mound covered in fabric and snow. It is a mass grave. He points to it, then to his stomach, and whispers, "All gone. Everyone gone. Even the taste is gone." You ask him if he has hope. He shakes his head. Hope was in the bones. We ground them all. Even the sky seems to forget its color. The sun is weak. The wind is dry. There are no birds. There are no songs. You pass murals etched into stone, last messages from the final artists. You are not what you eat. You are what you chose to eat. And then beneath that, a smaller message. We chose wrong. You keep walking through empty cities, through museums of dried blood and silent stoves, through temples with no gods and schools with no students, until finally you reach the last known bastion of recorded memory, the vault of flesh. Deep beneath the Antarctic ice, hidden within a cryogenic chamber powered by geothermal heat, lies the archive of what used to be humanity. Not photos, not words, just samples, flesh, preserved from every nation, every culture, every generation. Labeled, sealed, protected, it is the final museum. Not of ideas, but of flavor. A twisted time capsule of a species that devoured itself. The computer that monitors the vault still runs. It greets you by name, your biometric data scanned without your permission. Welcome, citizen. Final entry confirmed. Would you like to add your contribution to the human memory meal? You say nothing. It repeats the question. Would you like to be eaten by the future? There is no one left to eat you. You step outside. Above you, the stars blink silently in a sky with no prayers. Below you, Earth remains still. The hunger, at last, is quiet. And in that silence, with civilization gone and the last taste of humanity fading from memory, only one question remains. What does it say about us that when forced to choose, we chose to consume ourselves? Humanity's final meal. So, this is how it ends. not with a storm, or a war, or an alien invasion, but with a plate, a fork, a bite of ourselves served over and over again until nothing remains. The greatest threat to civilization was not an external force. It was hunger, mirrored against morality, accelerated by desperation. And when the moment came to decide what lines could never be crossed, humanity stepped over them, one mouthful at a time. In this timeline, the world did not collapse because people were evil. It collapsed because people were afraid to starve. And when fear eclipses principle, the unthinkable becomes routine. Families became recipes, schools became slaughterhouses, churches became kitchens, and the very idea of humanity, dignity, identity, soul was boiled away, rendered down into calories. This wasn't just the extinction of a species, it was the consumption of meaning. Art, love, language, memory, everything that made us more than flesh was devoured alongside it, not because it had to be, but because we could not stop ourselves. The cycle continued until the fork dropped, and the last plate was empty. So if one day you awaken in a world where every non-human food source vanishes, where the only thing left to eat is each other, ask yourself one thing before you take that first bite. Will you be the one who remembers what it meant to stay human? Or will you be seasoning in someone else's story? If this vision disturbed you, challenged you, or made you question what survival really costs, then you're exactly the kind of mind this channel is built for. What would you do if the only thing left to eat was us? Would you resist, adapt, or redefine morality in the name of hunger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Could you live in a world like this? Could you survive? Make sure to subscribe to the Altered Ripple Effect for more mind-bending, immersive journeys through terrifying and thought-provoking alternate futures. Every week, we dive into timelines you were never meant to see, but once you do, you'll never forget. Until next time, traveler, stay curious, stay human, and stay hungry for truth.